My name's Sam Tatam. I run the behavioural science practice at Ogilvy Consulting in London. And it's really exciting to be here to talk about how we might push the limits, the creative limits, with print. But more specifically, what I'm going to bring to the discussion is how we can start to better understand our psychology. And that testing with small variants based on hypotheses can have really big impacts for our clients. And this is our team in London, and our founder, Rory Sutherland, who's the vice chairman of the Ogilvy Group. We're a team of 12 behavioural scientists that apply this craft on a range of different categories, from communications and marketing all the way through to safety. And I'll talk a little bit about today how even printing can help us creatively applied in a safety environment to achieve our objectives. Today I want to cover a little bit about why we think behavioural science is so important. We'll have a bit of a journey into our brain. Hopefully we'll learn something. I want to share a few examples of this work applied. But importantly, I want to leave you with a simple framework, a way of thinking or navigating the world, so you can start to apply this thinking in your creative testing. So those are my three objectives. So firstly, why behavioural science as a key question? And we often use the analogy that we've been navigating the world with broken binoculars historically. And we've had two fractured lenses. The first fractured lens is a neoclassical model of economics. A lot of traditional marketing theory has been based on a neoclassical model, an assumption that humans are rational utility maximizers, that we navigate our world with perfect information and perfect trust, and so we only make decisions that are good for us. We only make decisions that are perfectly logical and rational. But we know this isn't the case. There are behaviours like altruism that humans don't stand to gain immediate benefit, but we do them anyway. And the second fractured lens is hypothetical decision making, an assumption that we can ask people when they might change their behaviour or why they might have changed their behaviour. And what recent research in psychology is teaching us that up to 90 to 95% of the decisions that we make are actually made in an evolutionary old part of our brain. So it's a part of our brain that we say it's opaque to introspection. We can't ask it because we simply can't access it. So what we'll do is generate a socially appropriate response based on the room that we might be in. You can pump the scent of lemon detergent into a cafeteria and give someone a crumbly cookie, and you'll find they meticulously clean up after themselves because they've been primed with the sense of cleanliness. They don't know it's the detergent that's inspiring their actions. It's subtle, subconscious cues. And when we look at how we can bring this thinking now into marketing or communications, we like this analogy. Imagine we're in the room today now, we're working to sell Coca-Cola. And we might ask ourselves, what are three ways we might increase the sales of Coca-Cola? And often when we ask this question, people say, make it cheaper. Right? That's one way. Make it cheaper. Or even better, let's make it bigger and cheaper. So even greater value for money. And often people say, maybe make it taste different. Maybe make it taste better. Right? Those are three fairly logical, rational sorts of solutions that you might expect to come from those two broken binoculars, right? Well, I think we see a little bit of nodding. But what's really interesting over the best part of a decade is that a category, a challenger, that's really given Coca-Cola a good run for its money, is a brand like Red Bull. Right? It's half the size, it costs twice as much, and certainly when you taste it for the first time, it's a little bit disgusting, right? There's something in the psychology of tasting just a little bit foul that reinforces the fact that it must be doing something good. And these are three solutions that we wouldn't get in a focus group. These are three solutions that people can't tell us. If you just made it taste a little bit worse, I might believe you have psychotropic powers. It's not going to happen. So behavioural science is starting to give us some new ingredients to shape our creative solutions. And we often talk about Coca-Cola and Red Bull, and it can feel like a one-off. So I have a few questions just to wake us up, just to get us into gear, a quick quiz. And I trust you in marking your responses and keeping your answers in your head, and I'll go relatively quickly through these. So the screens are relatively important for this one. So this is really about experiencing our brains. So the first question, a real easy one. Which square is lighter on this checkerboard? The A square or the B square? Which square is lighter, the A square or the B square? I'm talking to a room full of printing advocates. This will be an easy one. Second question. How many F's are in this sentence? Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of years. How many F's? Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of years. Last question, again, and this is an important one. This isn't a psychological test in this sense. It's not an ink block test. I'm not trying to sort of explore the deep, dark depths of you. I presented this once and someone said, "Why are you showing a picture of my parents fighting?" It's not the case. Can you see anything significant in this image? Can you see anything significant in this image? So try and keep those three answers on the top of your head, and now we'll explore them. So the first answer was B, so give yourself a slap on the back if you said B. There are 3 F's. Sometimes people say 4, but there are 3, and it was the Statue of Liberty. Did anyone get 3 out of 3? No? 2 out of 3. So a couple of 2s. Did anyone get 1? Right, so we've got a mix between 2s and 1s and some people that got it entirely wrong. And that's okay. In fact, that's what we're looking for. And because none of these answers are actually correct. But these are the answers that our brain tends to jump to, right? And I'll talk us through each of the questions and why that's the case and why it's really important for us to understand this. So the first question looks like an easy one. Which square is lighter, the A square or the B square? Right? Often we find most people say B. The B square looks lighter, but actually they are the exact same shade of grey. They are the exact same shade of grey. Our brain is a pattern recognizing machine, right? We don't navigate the world like our printers in RGBs. We navigate the world using context. And we see the B square surrounded by 4 dark squares, so we assume, okay, that must be a lighter one. We've also, over time, experienced the world under shadow. So we know that things that are under shadow are actually lighter than they may appear. So we sort of superimpose visual meaning on that. And I'm sure I can tell you until I'm blue in the face that they're the same shade of grey. But I still see B square as being lighter than the A square. So let's see what happens now as I start to remove some of the context. Right. So as we remove the context, we see that the illusion disappears completely. And this is really important for us. We love visual illusions in our discipline. Because just as we can make the B square look lighter than the A square, we can make one product appear more valuable than another product, or cheaper or more expensive based on the context that we can build. Right? We love these sorts of illusions that help to shine a light on how our brain works. There are 6 F's in this sentence. This was an experiment in the room today. Often we find and I suspect we have a large proportion of the room that English is a second language. Often we find when English is a first language that people don't necessarily need to read every word to extract its meaning. I also set a fairly strict word task. I ask you to search for an F, and we tend to miss the ofs. Right? And the ofs, we process information quite phonetically, so it sounds like a V. So we kick it out of the search task. Right? But again, we find time and time again that these patterns of behavior occur. Last question. Did anyone, I don't expect people to get the Statue of Liberty. Can people call out what they did see? We've got a face, a frog. Anything else? A frog? Great. All right. So, we're about to conduct a live lobotomy. Let's see if this works. I'm about to rewire our brains. So the psychology behind this is there's twice as much information that goes from a part of our brain called the limbic system, where a place called the hippocampus, where memory is encoded. Twice as much information that goes from that part of our brain to our primary occipital cortex, which is where we see, than from our eyes. Right? So we essentially see memory. So hopefully this means that if I change your memory, I'll change how you see moving forwards. So we did have some people that said this was a frog, and they were absolutely right. It was a frog. Hopefully now we can all see that it was a frog, and even if we didn't see, now it's certainly a frog. But if I change the image, I'm hoping that your memory of this image has changed, and now you will always see the frog when you're exposed with that question. Final question, this is a bonus question. Can you see any red on this page? Maybe I'll change the question. Which side has the most red? Left-hand side, we tend to find, most people say, the bowl of strawberries on the left-hand side has the most red. I can promise you there is not a single drop of red on this page. Right? It's a joy to be able to present this in Canon. There is not a single drop of red on this page. Right? This is actually just a collection of greens and greys. But because of the context of the color and our memory of strawberries, we superimpose red when there wasn't red. We do a lot of work in unconscious bias in recruitment. And if you can convince an audience that we have a strawberry bias, that we just saw color when it wasn't, we can start to be open to other biases that we might fall fallible to. So that's seeing our brain in action. But I wanted to spend just 2 minutes talking about why this is the case. So if I was a surgeon, and maybe today we're speaking to a room full of doctors and surgeons, and we're speaking about the human heart, right? I could tell you with relative certainty, basically every square millimeter of the human heart, every atrium and ventricle, the flow of blood. The brain is far more complex. There are more neurons in the human brain than there are stars in the galaxy. That means there's more potential patterns of connection in the human brain than there are atoms on Earth. And even some of the finest tools that we have are still very blunt in understanding the brain. So one way of thinking about the brain then is more theoretically. And one leading theory or way of deciphering the brain is seeing the brain in two systems. System 1, which is an evolutionary old brain, and System 2, which is a distinctively human brain. So System 1 is the part of our brain, if you imagine our brain growing like a cauliflower over time, over evolution, that we start with the brainstem and the sort of the short branches. This is our System 1. It's our limbic system. It's a highly emotional brain. It's the part of our brain that we share with chimpanzees and higher order mammals. Whereas System 2 is a distinctively human sort of frontal cortex, neocortex, very expensive brain. It costs a lot of glucose and a lot of calories to use this brain. So we tend not to. So when I mentioned that 90 to 95% of our decisions are made in an evolutionary old brain, I'm talking about our System 1. Our System 1 is very fast. It's uncontrolled. We can't police it. It just operates. It's effortless. It's highly emotional. And it's unconscious. I engage my System 1 when I'm talking and walking. I don't necessarily need to think of every action. I'm able to do it naturally. Right? System 2, though, is more controlled and slow. It's the part of our brain that thinks about thinking. It's the part of our brain that we can consciously access. And because we can consciously access it, we tend to overestimate how much it guides our decisions. Right? It's a part of our brain that we can't do two things at once. So it's the part of our brain we engage when writing poetry or solving Sudoku. But it's very hard to write a poem while solving a Sudoku at the same time. You have a clash. Whereas our System 1 works in parallel, really effortless. So a lot of our work is better understanding our System 1 responses, and on occasion seeing how and when we might engage with our System 2. And I'll talk really briefly now about a few ways in which we've engaged this, and talking through the quality of print. And one of the things we seek to find, as we've mentioned, are these small shifts, small, maybe unexpected shifts in an environment that speak to our evolutionary old brain, not the part of our brain that we think we're using all of the time. In this first case study, it's a slightly different starting point, but I think it's a good place to start. It's one of our earliest case studies in Greenwich Village in London during the London riots in 2012. And we were tasked with reducing antisocial behaviour on the streets of London. And if we were to go back to our neoclassical lenses of economics, we say get more police on the streets or increase the fines. But we found a lovely small insight that this case study video will give us a good exposure to. So lovely, simple, we think, creative twist to a context with big results. I'm conscious our amazing translators were looking at each other during that process because I don't think they were able to capture the audio. But essentially we found an insight around babies' faces reducing aggression. So we painted the shop fronts with babies' faces and had an 18% reduction in crime. So at the time, that was a correlational statistic. We didn't know if the police came on the week before and took all the crooks off the street. But we've been working with Oxford University since then, and we're finding that result looks like more like 20%. And actually what we've done now is shift our intervention to print. So we've started with spray paint, and now we're in Ealing, another area of London, to see if we can actually increase the impact of our result by having a more photorealistic face. Of babies. So watch this space. The second case I wanted to share is some work we're doing and have conducted with Christian Aid. It's a charity in London. And the process actually over the UK, the process that Christian Aid go through is to receive donations 1 week a year, is they have an envelope and they have volunteers that go and deliver an envelope to homes. And the next week, the same volunteer will go and pick it up, and hopefully it's full of money. That's the dream. So Christian Aid came to us to ask us to optimize their envelope. A lovely brief. How can we create an envelope that people put more money in? Was essentially the challenge. And these are our volunteers on the streets. And so what we developed were 6 interventions, and I'll read them out relatively quickly. So on the top left-hand side, we can see what was a really simple hand-delivered stamp. We value things more if we know effort and labour has gone into them. So simply by saying this is hand-delivered, do we drive a sense of reciprocity to our audience to donate more. The second condition was around urgency. I'm creating a sense of immediacy of the action. We're only collecting for this week. Will that increase our donations? The third, the top right-hand side, was all about the fluency and clarity that this is an appeal. And actually labelling it a donation envelope, making it very clear that this is what you do with this envelope. Calling that out clearly. Now if we go to the bottom row, and we're going to go orientation. So this is what's known as an affordance cue. You know, sometimes when you go to pull a door that's got a handle, but it should be a push. That's what's known as a false affordance cue. It trips our brain up. And what was really interesting about these envelopes is that they open from the side. So the normal affordance of an envelope is you put money in from the top. So we simply changed the orientation so people put money in from the top down. The second on the bottom row was about gift aid. So this is a process in the UK, whereas if you fill out a form, the government will match 25% of your donation. So it felt like a compelling test for us to run. And finally, a slightly obscure one was just increasing the weight, just increasing the paper stock from 90 GSM to 150 GSM. So we're going to have another quick experiment, and I'm going to go from the top to the bottom, and I'm going to ask us to clap loudest when we think the intervention that was the most successful. Right, so I'm going to start at hand delivered, to urgency, to appeal, down to orientation, and along gift aid. And I want us to please clap, and the louder we clap, let's see if there's wisdom of the crowd. So, clapping for hand delivered stamp. Anything? A few? Urgency? Or a little bit louder? Appeal? That's the winner to date, I think. Orientation. Gift aid. And weight. Ooh, all right. Now we're talking printers. Great. Okay, let's go through some of the results. So I think from our discussion, there was some louder clapping on appeal, but certainly the loudest on weight. So let's see how we all performed. So if we look at total donations raised, this is what it looked like. So the appeal was 10% more donations than our control group. So we tested 5 million envelopes in a control and 200,000 envelopes in each other condition. So appeal gave us a 10% boost. Hand delivered gave us a 13% boost. But what was interesting is that hand delivered gave us a 13% boost, largely driven by the fact that more people gave them back. So we had a higher return rate on hand delivered, not always a higher average finance. Weight, we're close there, 14%. So just increasing the paper stock from 90 to 150 GSM increased donations by 14%. So we're talking about a product today that I think can go to 350. Right, so this is $1 million machine here. And finally, 17%, just changing the orientation. The equivalent of walking into a door that says push, but you pulled because of the handle. What we did was change the orientation and had a 17% boost. And sometimes these are unexpected, which goes to the power of testing and trying things that might seem counterintuitive, but testing. How do we make the drink taste a little bit nasty so people believe it's working? Testing. But we did find that things worked significantly below the control. So gift aid, I think that was 46% below the control. So if we had gift aid plastered on each one, we would have lost a fortune. And we think the suspicion behind that is that what they call crowded out the motivation. People aren't donating to Christian Aid for financial benefits. They're donating to Christian Aid to feel better. So if you make it commercial, you take away some of that opportunity. And the final case I wanted to talk to, again, going from the streets of London through to a letterbox drop and now into a big tissue factory in North America. So we do a lot of work with Kimberly-Clark. And the challenge for us was how we can redesign some of their safety processes and train some of the workers about their brain. And this image on the screen, if you can see it, this is the inside of one of Kimberly-Clark's tissue factories in Connecticut. So this spool is a massive roll of tissue, right? And it's charging away at meters and meters and meters a second. And if we're talking tissue, so because of the environmental differences and the speed at which it's working, sometimes the tissues sort of miss a catch, and what you have is what's known as a hayout. So you have meters and meters of tissue that just go spilling into the factory. Right? So this is something that's really dangerous that you need to stop relatively quickly. So what the workers do is they switch off the electricity and they go into the machine to remove this hayout. Right? And that's a fairly dangerous procedure. So when they switch off the electricity, what they have is a blue lock A really simple blue lock that they lock on the electricity source, so no one can turn the electricity back on while they're in the machine. We could say that's a lovely behavioural intervention. The problem was people weren't using it. Right? This was a rule that was passed down that wasn't embraced by the people of the factory, and they were putting themselves in danger. So this is the idea that we've implemented. We turned a blue lock that was a responsibility to authority to a commitment to our family. We essentially personalised the locks of the mill workers. So that could be with your loved ones or with your dog. And what we did was hand the locks over, a bit like giving a Rolex at a ceremony. And we had a lovely simple poem that we printed to make it feel really valuable. This is not a lock. It's a fishing rod. It's dinner with your family. It's kicking a ball with your son. It's laughing with good friends. It's a commitment to coming home. This is not a lock. It's a big blue promise. So just a slight emotional layer on a rational procedure and delivered with the beauty of card. Right? People don't email wedding invitations, do they? They send it something of stock, right? Because it means something. So printing this out and delivering to our workers has some really lovely impacts. So that's a bit of a story of the brain and some cases. In closing, I wanted to arm us with a framework that certainly has changed how I navigate the world. And hopefully it arms us with a few different ways of thinking ourselves. And the framework is called Mindspace. So it's a framework that was actually developed by a number of academics with the UK government in around 2010. And Mindspace is an acronym for 9 of the most robust drivers of behaviour. So it's not an exhaustive list of why we do what we do, but it's a really good start at starting to uncover these drivers. And I'll go through each of the elements relatively quickly. So the M is about the messenger effect. We know that who delivers information is sometimes more important than the information itself. Right? So from Milgram's experiments in the 1960s, we know that simply asking someone to put on a white jacket was such an authority cue that people would put through a potentially fatal voltage to an unwilling participant. And authority cues can be really subtle. We're more likely to jaywalk, so cross the road illegally, following someone in a suit than someone dressed in tracksuit pants. So who is the messenger that's going to be delivering our communications? How can we make it authoritative? How can we make it most relevant to our audience? The I of Mindspace is about incentives. And sometimes when we think incentives, we think reward and lottery. But when we look at it through the lens of behavioural science, we can have a few different ingredients. One ingredient is a concept called loss aversion. We're twice as motivated to avoid a loss than we are to receive a gain. So Patrick, if I give you 10 euros and then take 10 euros away from you, the pain that you feel when I take it away from you is twice as powerful as the pleasure you felt when I gave it to you. So it's no surprise that we see until offer ends, right? Because we don't want to miss out on that. That means if we have a room, and if we have a team of salespeople and we have $100 for every printer we sell, or we start with $1,000 and take away $100 for every printer we don't sell, it's financially the same incentive, but psychologically very different. So how can we think of concepts like loss, of scarcity? If something becomes scarce, we fear we might miss out on it, and so we value it more. I'm sure we've all seen 2 seats left at this price. Right, we see it all the time, but it still works. There's something in our gut that just makes that work. N is for norms. We're herd creatures. I've been watching a lot of Blue Planet, and it's typically the fish that swims away from the school that's the one that's bitten off by the tuna first, right? If we were a crowd of gazelles going by ourselves, right? If we were out from the pack, we might find that we have amazing grass because no one's eating our grass. But we're needing to watch for predators 90% of the time. So it's better to be with lots of people or lots of other gazelles and have less good grass, but have 10% predator watching time, right? So referencing norms is really powerful. In one study looking at towel reuse in hotels, the study was encouraging people to reuse their towels. And they had 3 different conditions. The first condition asked people to reuse their towels to help save the environment. All right, so please reuse your towels to help save the environment. 38% of people reuse their towels. So not bad, not bad. But then they tried 2 conditions using social norms. So the first condition said, most people who stay in this hotel reuse their towels. So you're referencing the social norm and see how that impacts. So from 38% from an environmental to most people who stay in this hotel bumped up to 44%. Simply referencing the social norm. But what's really important about norms as we go away and start to print in a more bespoke manner, what's really important about norms is we're capturing the right norm. If we're looking to sell to a team of accountants, there's no point in referencing lawyers. It's the wrong norm. And in this experiment, the third condition, so we had environmental, we had most people who stay in this hotel. The third condition said most people who stayed in this very room reuse their towel. That figure jumped up to 49%. So what's the social norm and how can we communicate it in the most effective manner? I'll race through. D is for default. As I mentioned, it's very expensive for humans to think. It costs us a lot of calories, a lot of glucose, right? So we tend to operate on autopilot. You might have heard some of the famous statistics. In Austria, organ donation is up to 99%. In neighboring Germany, it's down to 12%. I think, is it because of cultural differences, religious differences? The most significant difference is that in Germany, you need to opt in. In Austria, you need to opt out. So just the nature of the choice to become a donor has hugely significant impacts. So if we think of language, right, and again, if we go from today to start to write different copy and use these tools, it's the difference between saying this is a parental questionnaire for a school versus an annual feedback form. Parental questionnaire is opt-in, maybe I'll write it. An annual feedback form is an opt-out. You're doing it. Right, so language can be hugely powerful in creating new defaults. S is for salience. Shouldn't be news to many of us that color, personalization, the ability to have a receiver's name on a document has huge impacts. Contrast has great impacts. Salient feedback. Our inner chimpanzee, you know when you're on an Amazon checkout button and the luminance changes just that little bit when you hover your mouse over it, gives you a sense of agency. Our inner chimpanzee really loves that. So salient feedback is hugely important. Color, personalization. P is for priming. We've talked about this study today, that our behaviors can be shaped by subtle sounds and scents and words and cues. We did some work from the sublime to the ridiculous in adult incontinence. And our challenge was how we use language to make women feel more comfortable about accepting incontinence. And if we look at the category talks about bladder weakness. It's a negative. Right? It primes the whole category very negatively. We explored this more positively. We talked about having a relaxed bladder. It's okay to be relaxed. And we found simply by changing the frame, we made women more accepting of the issue by changing the prime. A is for affect. Our emotions heavily shape our actions. But for us in behavioural science, it's not just the emotion that we're looking to elicit, but it's also an emotional state that people might be in when they're in touch with us. So we know we're more likely to buy high-calorie foods if we go shopping when we're hungry. We know that men in a cold state of arousal will say, yes, I will always use a condom. But in a hot state of arousal, that behaviour might be very different. So we need to think about creating a default in advance of this. We can predict this. C is for commitment. We seek to be consistent with public pledges. So the pledge that we made with our Big Blue Promise was a subtle commitment device. We find it very painful if we break our promises. So sometimes small, subtle shifts can make big impacts. In one study, looking at fraudulent tax claims, and they looked at the layout of a mileage form. And if you imagine, I've never given witness testimony, but I suspect if I was going to court to give witness testimony, they would ask me to swear on the Bible first and then give my testimony. Not give my testimony, then swear on the Bible. But if you look at tax forms, they ask you to fill in the mileage and then sign. Right? So what this study did was turn the signature to the top of the page and found a significant reduction in fraudulent claims. Right, so that's $1 million solution with a 10-step shift to the page, right? Thinking about the psychology of commitment and promises, and really significant small tweaks. And finally, E is for ego. We do things that make ourselves feel better about ourselves. So if we can signal to others, if we can show our status, and one of the suspicions of the success of the Prius was that it's such an ugly car, right? Everyone knows you must be doing something for the environment. You know that person driving a Prius, they're really great. So how can you give people an opportunity to share their status, to signal to the world, to make them feel better about ourselves with every pitch of contact and communication? So that's a whistle-stop tour hopefully through why behavioural science, why it's exciting us, and experiencing it for ourselves. As well as seeing some creative ways that we can look at a context, that we can look at a printing solution, and a subtle shift to have quite dramatic impacts. I'm around for the rest of the day, and we'll be up on level 1 for some of the sessions. So if anyone has any questions off the back of this, I'd love to talk in more depth. If you'd like any more information about ourselves and our team, there's some information on the board. Now we have a blog called Oh Behave, and every year we run a festival called Nudgestock. It's like Woodstock for behavioural science. So you're always welcome there. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me today, and I'll hand over. Thank you.